You okay there, buddy? Yeah, I thought so.
Uh, oh God.
Well, to
What
lighten the
is-
tension before we get into this, I won a little Master Shifu with a claw
I
machine
was
today.
was wondering what that little fluffy thing you were playing with was.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, won something from a claw machine for like the first time in 10 years. So I was like,
I've
oh,
never bought anything from a claw machine ever.
I was like, let's put two. Like,
I've spent dozens of dollars on them. I've never
I
won
spent
something.
like $3 and I got this one. I was like, oh, how about that? All right, that's
Well,
cool.
fuck you, Michael.
Hey, I never win anything, so
All right.
Oh, The
So
Whale, which is the latest Darren Aronofsky film. We're way behind on catching up with this one.
yeah, I mean, we saw the movies, but then recording the actual things is a little different, right? So,
Yeah, we saw
yeah.
it weeks
So
ago.
here we are
Yeah,
talking about this movie that came out a month and a half ago.
I mean, it still got buzz because like it just won at the Critics' Choice Awards.
Yeah.
I guess Brendan Fraser did.
I mean, well deserved, of course.
Yeah, this movie definitely has stirred up some interesting controversy. Um,
Mm,
like mostly like, and I don't think the claims were founded based in the context of the film. Like mostly just concerns of like fat phobia and stuff like that. But it's like I get where the complaints come from, but in the context of the
who
film,
was
like there's
complaining?
um
That's my main question because, like, for me, okay, if the actual demographic that is being supposedly affected is the one actually complaining about it, then I will see it as valid. But if it's just like some person looking for something that they see as problematic and then like having an issue with it and trying to raise a kerfuffle, like, no.
I think
Uh,
it's a little column A, a little column B, from my personal understanding.
have you seen any, like larger people who have stated their complaints about this?
I can't think of any names off the top of my head. I did do a little bit of research into like what research was done into the film and kind of like who they consulted with while they were making it.
Yeah.
And I do know like they connected with some association, I forget which, specifically about obesity.
Mhm.
And just kind of how to tackle the issue. So I do know like it wasn't done with careless thought, and also not to mention this movie does tackle a level of obesity that is like legitimately physically dangerous. So I feel like that's a different category than standard fat phobia.
Mhm.
Is that the right term for it?
Yeah. I guess fat phobic is a thing. I find it weird because the whole concept is like body positivity in general doesn't like using the term fat.
Yeah, so that seems
But
contradictory to me.
so we just use the negative word that we want to stop using to refer to the people who are not good for our movement. Like, I don't know how that works out, but
Yeah, it seems
whatever.
contrarian to me, or contradictory. But yeah,
Yeah,
either way, the point still stands. Like, so basically, it seems like kind of a lover hate it kind of a film based on what I've seen. And there's
sure.
definitely, I feel like, even outside of the concerns about how it represents certain issues, I can definitely see this being a lover hated film.
I
Um,
mean, Aronofsky films are nothing if not polarizing, right? I mean, we just have
yeah.
to look back at how you feel about Mother
Oh
versus how I feel about Mother.
God.
Um, but I mean, even going back in his catalog, oddly enough, the one movie of his that I have not seen is the one that everyone else has seen, and I think that's why I'm less interested in seeing it, is The Fighter.
Yeah,
But
but like Darren Aronofsky didn't do the fighter. That was David O. Russell.
no, The Wrestler. Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one I have not seen, but I've seen all of the rest. I've been an Aronofsky fan since like 2001 or 2002. I still love Pi. I think Pi is a great movie. Requiem for a Dream, I think, is very necessary viewing for everyone. The Fountain is one of my favorite movies.
Fountain's
Like,
good. I've seen the fountain.
and I personally love Mother for all of it's one of my favorite feel bad movies.
That's
Um,
fair.
it's like a first person descent into the hell of gaslighting, like personified. But that's the thing. Aronofsky movies are not subtle. They're not meant to
No.
be subtle. And if that's not your bag, then you're not going to like this movie. Like, this movie is very intimate, close, in your face, very obvious and direct with its themes. The like it's not a subtle movie. It is very open and raw about what it is. And personally, I'm fine with that,
Yeah.
especially when it's anchored by such good performances
Oh
for the
yeah,
most.
like this is definitely a what can be considered a bottle movie because it all takes place in
Yeah.
one central location. That pretty much hinges on Brendan Fraser's performance, and I'm so glad he's back. I
Yeah.
really am.
Yeah. No, that goes without saying. I think everybody there's out of all the opinions about this movie that come out, I don't think anyone is contesting the fact that Brendan Fraser's performance is incredible.
Oh yeah, and he like gives it 110%.
Yeah.
He's my favorite
Uh,
robot, and he's great in this movie too.
there's the reason that this movie, like, the reason, one of the main reasons that I'm hesitant to listen to people who are complaining about this movie is like, when it comes to weight problems, right? Um, I have very, I have mixed feelings on the spectrum of the body positivity movement because on one hand, I think it's fine to be a larger person. I think you should feel good about being a larger person. Lord knows most of the women that I've dated have been on the larger side. I like it personally. Like, it's not a problem for me. It never has been. Even when I was like 150 pounds, like, not a problem for me. Um, but I think that and there are cases where people can be healthier while still being, you know, larger. But I feel like there's still a bunch of people that um kind of use that information to defend their own poor habits.
mm,
And I've literally watched people use that logic to not do anything about their own health issues and then just over the course of years seen it develop into like really debilitating health issues, like um and then there's my own experience with having an eating disorder, like um it was one of the main things about this movie that really struck me was, aside from the actual physical weight, I related very, very, very deeply to the main character and the way that his depression had shut him in there. And honestly, um, I've seen I know somebody who is basically this size,
mm.
and they are homebound and they have issues like health issues. Um, and they're a wonderful, wonderful human being, but they have trouble day to day and they're not healthy. And they do have to use a breathing apparatus at night, like stuff like that. And it hurts my heart to see them in that state. Um, like, I've known them for a significant amount of time. We met online like almost 20 years ago. Um, but that's the thing. There's the conceptual idea of respecting this situation, and then there's also the reality of this situation.
Yeah.
And I will say there's one scene in this where he essentially goes through an emotional breakdown and just starts eating,
Yeah.
like ravenously eating, just almost angrily eating. Um, that's real. When you have an eating disorder, that is very real. I've had moments like that. Um, this movie fucked me up. Like, it legitimately fucked me up. And it's been on my mind since I watched it. And something that's on my mind is like, I've been through a lot of rough shit over the past 3 years, and my life is very different now from what it used to be. Um, and I've lost a lot of the future that I was planning for myself, and things that I was very invested in having for my life and that I was building over the past decade, or more than a decade. They're gone. Um, and still day to day, like I'm still trying to be somewhat careful about COVID, especially now that you're hearing about the new stuff that's happening again, and the government's not doing anything this time. Um, really no better than Trump with their response to this at this moment. Um, and it's worrying, but in that process, I've kind of also shut myself in and let my depression take hold really toughly, like sometimes. The last 3 months of last year were particularly bad. And I'm doing better right now. Um, I'm doing the work. I am feeling better. I'm getting better. I'm mostly not doing that anymore, but there are still times where, it is an addiction. You get into a mood, and maybe you're not even in a bad mood. You're just idle and you don't know what to do with yourself, and your mind goes to dopamine and stimulation. It's the same thing as, if you come home at the end of the day and you don't know what you do with yourself and you immediately default to, oh, I'm going to play video games. Your brain automatically sees that as a pleasure source. It sees that something that keeps your brain occupied and it gives you dopamine. So you automatically resort to that instead of trying to think about other stuff that you might want to do. And there's a measure of discipline you have to develop for that and everything. But it's the same thing when it comes to eating disorders and food. Like part of your brain turns off and you just feel like, I could do with a little more of that kind of satisfaction. And when you're going through an intense emotional break, that hits with a vengeance because you just want to you basically eat until you feel sick, which he vomits at the end of that.
Yeah.
Um, it's there's so many moments in this movie that were very real representations of isolation and food addiction and self-abuse and depression and just unprocessed trauma
Yeah.
that in some ways it actually served as a bit of a wake-up call to me. Like I literally could see myself where he is in 10 years if I don't do something.
Mm.
Um, which says a lot about how bad the place I've been in is, but also I think just if it's that real for me, I honestly don't give a shit what anyone says about how they might find this offensive
Yeah.
because of their suppositions about how it will affect the imaginary larger people that they have in their head. And maybe there are some larger people that got offended by it, but there is a massive amount of empathy in this movie,
Yeah.
coupled with the realism of it. And I don't know, there's a lot about it that's truly heartbreaking, but it's also pretty realistic.
Yeah. I'm not, as far as eating disorders go, that's definitely a case where I'm not gonna pretend to know enough to have a proper discussion about that, at least from my perspective.
Hmm.
That being said, with my own issues and my own struggles, and about all these.
I mean, it
Um,
goes with any addiction,
yeah,
basically.
and it's like I do understand the impulsive need because I was also in a kind of similar place the last 3 months of last year, where I just like definitely at an all time low. And the first thing you do is just whatever, just grabbing at everything, pretty much. Anything that can make you either just numb yourself to whatever you're feeling or just distract for a minute. Or realistically, like at least in like my case, it's more just like what is the most self-destructive thing that I know is not good for me that I can do right now because there's a chance it might end things. And like this is gonna get dark. I apologize to advanced viewers.
It's a
Um,
dark movie about real shit, man. No, I get
yeah.
it.
So, but like if we're gonna go in that territory, let's actually talk about it. Because I feel like from my perspective, like that's a lot of what it boils down to is more like it's bad for you, it's bad where you're doing it, and you shouldn't be doing it, but you just don't give a shit because at that point it's like, what is the goddamn point?
I mean, that's almost the reason that you're doing it, right?
Yeah,
There is a death wish behind it on a certain level. There is, you know, there was a movie I watched a long time ago, which was pretty good, honestly. And there was a sequel, and it was a more questionable. And the guy then tried to spin it off into a whole business with coaching shit. So fuck all that. But the initial movie is called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead,
Mm.
and it's about this dude who just weighed a lot and decided to go on a 2 month juice fast, just literally drinking nothing but green juice
Mm.
for that period of time, and exercising, and just trying to get himself to the point where he could lose a bunch of the weight that he had gained. Um, and in the process of doing that, like, he was Australian, he came to America and did kind of a road trip. And the movie takes this shift because halfway through the movie, he's pretty much done his fast. And then someone that he spoke to on his trip across the country calls him and just says, like, I think I need help.
Mm.
Um, and the second half of the movie is about him partnering up with this guy who is like, he's obese, he's seriously having weight issues. And like, they record some of his sleep apnea and stuff, and there's something that I think his mom says, and she's like, he just, something happened where he got really sad and he just never came back from it, which is, funny enough, kind of what happened to me. um and she said that I think this is actually his way of slowly killing himself, because he can't commit to doing it one of the other ways, like one of the more direct, immediate ways. So um this is kind of his way of doing it. And at the time I thought, like, that feels impractical, but as time has gone on, like, when I am feeling like absolute shit and I am not caring about what I do to myself, that's when you go for I mean, the whole meatball sub thing in this movie hit me a little too close to home. Like, meatball subs, Philly cheesesteaks, McDonald's, like, the food that is bad for you and doesn't have the nutrients that you need, but you're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I don't care about myself.
Mm.
I'm going to eat something that just makes me feel happy, even if it gives me heartburn later, even if it, like, gives me, like, full on indigestion. Like, I'm just gonna do this thing, and I don't care whether it's good for me or not. I'm not gonna exercise. I'm not gonna take my vitamins. I'm not gonna, like, eat salads or vegetables, because on a certain level, I want to die.
I think, and this is gonna get really deep here. So,
But we aren't already.
well, this goes to my mom, which, as you know, is kind of a sensitive subject for me. But it's a lot of what I want, or I wonder a lot, if that's kind of what my mom did,
Alcohol.
with alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, if that was kind of just a very prolonged suicide note.
I mean, I feel
Because,
this. I feel the same way about my uncle, man. I
yeah.
understand.
So, like, that's a question I'll never get the answer to. That's the weird part about it. But it also makes me terrified for myself, because, like, I take more after my mom in that way specifically. Um, and there were times I've caught myself in my own cynical, nihilistic spirals, and I was like, "Oh, I'm very capable of doing the exact same thing."
Oh yeah,
Um,
I think anybody is. I think
yeah,
that's. I think it's kind of this whole thing of, like, they're edge lords online who like to quote the whole Joker thing of, like, all it takes is one bad day. And
fuck
it's
those
like,
people.
I think most of the time, for most people, that one bad day is not going to result in them going and shooting up a mall or something. It's going to result in them locking themselves inside, giving up on life, and just living off of DoorDash and Netflix for the rest of their life, until they collapse in on themselves and just, there's no way back to society.
It's like, what's that Patton Oswalt sketch? Where he's like, Batman go fuck himself. Like, that's not what would actually happen. He would be the worst.
I
Like,
haven't seen that one.
he would not be like the cool dark. He would be just like the world's worst slam poet. Uh,
he is, like, super goth, super emo.
super goth is going bang bang in the alley. It's like boo.
Pearls everywhere.
Yeah,
Martha.
yeah.
My mother's name's on my father's lips one last time.
Clark's just in the back
Last
going,
breath,
"Hey, my
Martha.
mom's name is Martha."
Shut up, Clark. This is my moment. Yeah, you
Anyway,
know.
but the levity aside, the point is just like, even though it's not directly involved with obesity or binge eating or anything like that, there is a serious discussion to be had just about that suicidal ideation, where you don't want to do it, but you don't know another way.
It's I think the core thing behind it is that in those moments you have to eat. It's making you uncomfortable, you're hungry. And the I think the reasoning behind each moment is each time you decide to have a meal in that state, it's this question of like, well, why bother? Why bother trying to, do something that is actually, healthy for me? Why make that effort? Why deny myself this little bit of thing? This was also something I talked to a friend of mine about years ago when we were gym buddies and we were talking about like what this stuff was like and what fasting is like. And I remember describing it to him in the moment, and I didn't realize at that point how much I was describing an eating disorder.
Mm.
And I literally said like something along the lines of when every single day is suffering, when every single day sucks and you're sad and you're alone and you're depressed and you don't understand the point of the future, food is one of the few times a day where you get something that you can just enjoy,
Yeah.
that you can reliably enjoy. And to try to change that into something healthy for some far off promise of a better body which doesn't solve the rest of your shitty life, right? So why
That's the
try?
point.
Why do that? Why deny yourself the one thing that makes it easier to get through each day? When like when you're so fucking sad that the only thing that makes you smile in a day is like eating a cheeseburger,
Yeah.
that's so fucking sad.
Yeah.
That's a bad place to be in. But Lord knows I've been in it so many fucking days.
Yeah.
It's how I got here with my body the way that it is. And I'm trying to fix it now, but like it's a long road and it takes a lot of suffering to get to that point. You have to get stuck. And I think that's really the whole thing about this. I can see how some people might it's almost like a morbid voyeurism, I guess. Like when they show the whole body suit near the beginning and him taking a shower for a minute. Um, I understand perhaps having a problem with that. Um, but there's something that I've said in therapy to my therapist. Like I'm like, I want to lose this weight. And they said, well, what if you just learn to accept yourself as you are? And I told them, I don't have a problem with other people being okay with their weight, but for me personally, the extra weight on my body is a physical manifestation of the trauma and abuse that I've endured over the years. Like I literally remember the point where I crossed the threshold to 250 pounds, and I've never been able to go back since then. Not yet anyway. But that was like one of the worst fucking traumas of my life, one of the worst moments emotionally of my life that pushed me to that point. And to me, it damaged me in a way that I still haven't fixed because I'm still above 250. So for me, the idea of getting back below that weight is almost like repairing the damage and sadness that was done to me by these people.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to debate whether or not that's a healthy thing to do, but it's just the way that it manifests in my head. Like it is like the physical, it is literally like a physical ball and chain that I am carrying around with me
But
as a mark of the hurt.
it sounds like a powerful sentiment to you though. So I feel like that puts it almost in a different category altogether. Because it's not just like, oh, you're ashamed of how you look or anything like that. It's more like, no, carrying this around is a constant reminder of things I want to move on from. And I feel like that's very different.
Yeah. I mean, if I look at myself in the mirror and I see this on me and I like the feeling of what I don't like there is the feeling that I want to leave this behind, and what I'm seeing is a product of that, and that I was better before then.
And you
You
see
know,
the progress you're making towards that as a sign that you are working through what hurt you.
well, I care enough about myself for long enough periods of time to actually undo some of that harm, to actually take better care of myself and make an effort to improve. And that's
That's great. That's fucking hard.
yeah, and it takes a long time. It's slow progress. So, um, and honestly, like I don't mind medically assisted weight loss either. Like I know there's a lot of controversy right now over people using Ozempic
I'm not
to
familiar with controversy there.
it's like this diabetes drug that helps control. But that's the thing. Like it is literally a drug that moderates your blood sugar and regulates your insulin. And a lot of people may not be full blown diabetic, but a lot of people who are overweight on that level have such a damaged relationship with food and their bodies and hunger that um, those are the exact things that are damaged. Like their insulin response is fucked up. It fucks up their hunger responses, and their blood sugar is kind of messed up. Like getting a medication to stop that before it gets to full blown diabetes doesn't sound like a bad thing to me. And I understand that it's also kind of like low in stock. They need to up the production. I understand that some people need the drug, but I don't think more people using it is the problem. I think they just need to up production of it because now there's more demand. And I think that it could actually help a lot of people out. So this year I lost 45 pounds thanks to those drugs.
Oh, congratulations.
And thank you. But my main point about it being, I would not have been able to do that without that. And it's not a matter of like, oh, you don't try hard enough, you don't want it hard enough. You're right. On a certain level, I won't want it hard enough because there were large points of last year where I just didn't want to be alive. Um, and the point of like part of getting me back to where I want to be alive is not hating myself and the body that I'm in so much. So, um, yeah, if I took a drug that helped moderate my body responses after, who knew that being like hardcore weed smoker for like a decade and just eating recreationally sometimes and just like smoking and you're hungry and you go eat and oh your hunger is not limited the way that it normally is when you're stoned, so you can eat so much more. Who knew doing that for like a decade would fuck your body's relationship with hunger up
Yeah.
and like relationship with nutrients? Like it's a problem. It's something that's damaged within me, and having a drug to help recover through that when I'm having a hard time emotionally, like I'm at peace with that. um so yeah, it's tricky to balance out because a lot of people see weight loss as being fat phobic in the first place, and I disagree with that sentiment entirely. I think that it's something that if you want to do it for better health and it is impacting your health, then you should absolutely not feel any shame about that. And you should be proud of that work because that work is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
But we just shouldn't be like, we shouldn't be bullying people because they're bigger. There's some fucking like, there's some very attractive people who are considered obese. All right. So like, let's not play around. Like that's not the factor here. Um, but back to the movie, like all of this to say, um, this movie is the portrayal of somebody who is at the end of the line with this kind of thing. This is this kind of problem taken to the extreme. And if you've ever watched something like My 600 Pound Life or something, it's really sad. It's a really tragic thing. And a lot of the time when you watch these people go through their lives in these situations, you can see how miserable and depressed they are, and something happened to them to put them to that point. Once you pass a certain point, it's not just a body acceptance thing. It is an addiction. Something's going on there, right?
Yeah.
So this movie tackles these concepts of trauma and addiction very realistically, I
Yeah.
think. It takes him to a bit of an extreme, but it's an extreme that is not necessarily uncommon, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
And something weird that I was thinking when I was going through this thing, like afterwards, I was processing it, and I realized this is the first movie since Shame that I have seen
Mm.
tackle addiction.
You let me borrow Shame. I remember that fucking movie. That
Yeah,
one fucked me up for a week. Yeah.
that movie fucks. It's one of my favorite movies, but that movie fucked me up too. But these are two movies that have tackled something that a lot of people don't consider when they think about the concept of addiction. But it is definitely people who have gone through some kind of trauma who are addicted to these things and really focused on them, and they are essentially letting it ruin their lives, and they are isolating themselves from reality and other people while just single-mindedly using this thing to get themselves through.
Yeah.
And both of them just have their jobs otherwise. Like that's it, right? So I they're completely different movies, but
Oh,
somehow
night
I
and
feel
day.
like
Yeah.
they hit that same mark. And I haven't, like, this is the first time since Shame I've seen another movie do this. And I think that's super admirable.
Yeah. And I think what I liked about this, like Charlie, the character's name's journey too, is that he is at the end of his rope and he is struggling with demons that he knows he's not going to be able to conquer. I don't even know if he wants to towards the end, but he's still like he still is really just empathetic person and he wants to feel genuine human connection, and he's
Yeah,
struggling to do that in his like with the time he has left because he knows he's dying. So he tries to connect with his daughter. His daughter's awful.
absolute shitbag, like
Uh,
absolute piece of shit child.
like awful
I
person.
hated her so much.
But one thing I kind of liked about it, and like even she is reprehensibly awful, and everyone knows she's awful, but he's kind of like she's just being honest. He kind of gives her a pass, but I get the logic behind it.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, she is just a kid.
she is just a
She's
kid, and
working
like
through
she's
some
still,
shit.
and like she's been through her own fair share, and she has a right to be angry.
Mhm.
And but at the same time, I did like he's also a writing teacher, and at the end of the day, he kind of writes this big like angry message. It's like I don't give a shit what your actual opinion is. I don't give a shit how you feel about this. Just tell me what you really fucking think.
Like, give
Uh,
me something honest.
Give me something honest. And there's some like for some reason that really clicked with me. Uh,
I think there's also something to be said in that because, like, the amount of topics that this movie covers is kind of astonishing. Because aside from the weight and depression stuff that we've been talking about for the most part, there's also the question of like homophobia
yeah,
and overly religious pressure and cults and how they like small communities that are super religious and how they affect generational trauma and um like the consequences, like just because someone embraces their sexual orientation and wants to experience it doesn't mean that the way they do it can't also be wrong. And the way that
yeah,
Charlie went about it is clearly wrong. It he abandoned his family.
yeah,
He abandoned his daughter, all that stuff. And and his wife at this point is now an alcoholic
yeah,
to cope with all the shit that happened. And like there's so many, and of course the daughter's whole issue with being abandoned and how she tackles those feelings.
yeah,
um there's a lot of interesting complex emotions kind of tossed in here, and not all of them are explored in a really
no,
deep way, but they are explored in ways that do feel genuine.
yeah.
And I think
It does
there's a
feel
lot of
like
credit for that.
I'm sorry I interrupted that last name, but
No,
like
go for
there does feel like there's a raw emotional connection to all the material, even if all of it doesn't necessarily land, or it's as you said, it's explored in like the most depth it could be given. But like again, that's kind of why I feel like that line in particular struck me because at the end of the day, it's also like, can we just cut through the bullshit? Like, stop telling me what you think I want to hear.
Yeah,
Stop telling me like even if you fucking hate my guts, just tell me what you really fucking think. And I guess for me, a reason like that connected me because that's a frustration I feel like I've been having the last few years, especially like my job and all that. Whereas like I like you and I both know you're bullshitting right now. So for the love of God, can we just be clear with each other about what you think? Even if it's you fucking hate me, I don't care. Just tell me what it is, and then we can, like, at the very least have something to go off of.
Well, there's also the question of like how much of that comes with from the fact that he was dishonest to himself about his being gay.
Oh yeah, guilt can absolutely play a part in that.
Exactly. But like, how much of this is someone who's near the end of their life, who is looking back on their life, and one of their biggest regrets is not being honest, is trying to make themselves be something that other people wanted them to be, right? So, I think that ties in. Like, honestly, at this point, with my whole life journey, um, there's a lot right now that has clicked very strongly over the past couple of years with everything I've gone through and everything I've lost, and just this whole thing of if there's things I could tell the younger me, there are people who say, what would you tell the younger you, 15 years ago? What would you say to them? And I'm like, oh boy, howdy, do I have a few things to say. And I have a lot more to say now than I did before COVID hit.
Yeah.
So some of that does have to do distinctly with being honest with yourself. Because there's a lot of my life that I spent rejecting certain sides of myself because, it was pussies do that, or it was more sensitive and it was seen as weak, and guys would pick on it. My friends, people who were my friends, didn't accept me. They would give me shit for it. They would bust my balls for it. And like, that's just part of male culture, but it's horrible. It's horrible. And there's so much of myself that I push down. And even my girlfriends at times, they would get mad at me for like not being masculine in certain ways. And if I could go back and tell myself, like, no, fuck those people, just be honest.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. Fuck all of these people. Don't be their friends. When you are finally honest with them, they will leave. So just make them leave now. They're not worth it. And that's really like, I feel like there's an element of that in how Charlie sees the world and how he expresses himself and why he's trying to push that on people.
Yeah. And like, I definitely understand what you're saying too, because I definitely grew up in that very male, toxic masculinity culture. And like, it's one of those things, like, as an adult, like, as I got older, I started realizing I connected much better with women as friends more than I did with men my own age. And I realized it just because, like, because I'm severely traumatized by male culture and I don't trust men. That's really what it is.
Honestly, it's the reason I don't really hang out with Persians. A lot of the young Persian people that I've been around are just like, they're not doing much to fight the stereotypes, man. Like they are very much falling. And here's the thing, like a big part of it has to do with the fact that, a lot of the circles that you associate and the people with the big personalities tend to be the ones that adhere to those stereotypes. So you have men who are very focused on those general male stereotypes, and they want women who basically just want to be princesses and taken care of. And like, that's not the norm. Like, not all Persians are like that, but unfortunately the circles I've run in happen to have an overwhelming majority of those kinds of fucking people. So I just don't want to take the time to figure out if a person is one of those or not. Like, I just don't seek it out.
I get it. Well, to an extent, I get it. I'm not with Persian specifically.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you have enough bad experiences with something, you kind of just are like, okay, I'm just gonna try other things for a while.
Oh yeah. I remember when I was younger, like in my late teens, I tried talking to somebody in my friend group at the time about just like how I like years of abuse and like verbal emotional abuse I was putting up with. That was kind of funny. It's like, hey, like, I don't want to put up with that anymore. That hurt me. And then he called me Two-Face, and I haven't spoke to him since. That was back when I was like 12 years ago. Not to, so I guess what I'm trying to connect all that to is more of the fact that, like, yeah, honestly, going back to what you're saying about the talking to yourself, like if I would just like honest from the get-go, like I would have lost friends, but I wouldn't have as much fucking trauma.
I mean, you would have stood up for yourself, right? That's one of the main things. Like being willing to stand up for yourself and being willing to be honest, not just with other people, with yourself, instead of just trying to do what you think will get you further in life. That's something that's really hard for a lot of young people. And some young people, are just, they have no problem with that. Unfortunately, a lot of those younger people tend to just be douchebags, but like there's a balance, so it's it's just like I understand why that is so important to this character at this point in his life.
And
Um,
again, like God bless Brendan Fraser, really just captures this compassion and empathy and just these kind of just raw desire to work, not even just work through shame and guilt, about not just about his condition, but what his own actions,
mhm.
but still try to genuinely do good by others and still genuinely believe in people, um
Yeah.
towards the end. And like when you've been through enough shit, like I have a huge amount of respect for people that do still choose. I actually just wrote an essay about it not too long ago,
Mm.
that do still choose to be kind, that still choose to be the best they can be for other people after they've gone through the worst hell of their lives.
Oh, well, thanks, buddy.
Yes, that goes for you too, buddy. We've had this conversation. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's true though, because I feel like those people know a certain amount of strength that most people will have no perception of.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times when I've like not even joked, but it's not something you can bring up and nor this isn't, it's not a soup question, as they say.
Yeah.
But I there's certain points when I've had these deeper conversations about, uh, patriarchy and masculinity and, my own role in it and my growth and my learning process and all that. And um, I I am so relieved that I didn't fall down like the red pill rabbit hole.
Yeah, me too.
Um, because I could have very easily. There was a lot of I dated a lot of very mentally ill people in my life. And this is not a knock against them. I am also severely mentally ill. That's why we got along. But the thing is that, if it's unmanaged, if you're still not developed to the point where you've learned how to cope with it and handle it in a way that doesn't fucking hurt other people, is bad juju. So there, there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of anger at some points. And I could have easily taken that down that hill. Like there was definitely a point where I was kind of starting to lean that way. And I was like, watching fucking pickup artist shit and
Oh god.
like that stuff, like
Yeah, I
treating
did too.
treating relationships like some kind of scientific formula. But most of it was I was like just isolated and lonely. Like I didn't know how to relate to people. So I saw that as a way out of that. And it was really one of the only channels I saw supporting me out of that. And thank God I had friends instead of that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I also think that if I got certain point within that, the lack of empathy would have also hurt. Because I'm just naturally a very fucking empathetic person. I can't stop it. So I'm just really glad I didn't go down that fucking 4chan red pill rabbit hole. And I think another side of that though is the dangerous side of that is that when you have something within you that is trying to assign blame, right?
Mm.
The red pill fucking route is assigning that blame to women. That's the whole like incel pipeline.
Yeah.
But if you go the other path, you tend to just blame yourself.
That's one thing I've definitely been struggling with finding acceptance with. Because yeah, it is, you want something to blame even if it is yourself because it gives you the illusion of control. It gives you this perception that, especially when you blame yourself like I tend to do, which is like, okay, if it's my fault, that means I can learn what I did wrong. That means I can fix it. And that means doesn't have to happen again. Or conversely, it can also mean, oh well, I'm permanently broken and nothing's ever gonna fix it, so why bother? Um
Also, the side of where like initially I might get mad at the other person, but then I think about how I'm being unfair to them and how I'm not taking accountability for my own thing. And eventually that gets turned around all the way into just being my fault. And that it does not help that I have had abusive relationships where my partners have taken advantage of that instinct and just gaslit the shit out of me.
Oh yeah, my last relationship was very full of that. And that exact same road, which is, oh well, I don't want them to be all at fault because that doesn't feel fair. So I'm gonna analyze what I did wrong. But the problem is because you're the only, like, I'm only speaking for myself. Since you're the only one willing to take accountability, that means you take all the accountability. And you end up blaming yourself for everything falling apart, even though when you actually break it down, it really wasn't. And it's not fair to hold
Well,
yourself to that standard either. Granted,
and
that's not
that's
to
the
say
thing.
you're not accountable for anything that happened during that time.
Exactly. There's nuance. It's not going all the way one way or the other. And I think that's something that this movie tackles really elegantly in the fact that everyone has had a hand in the situation getting to this point. Everyone could have handled something a bit better, as
Yeah.
well as, there being other external influences that caused it to get to that point. Um, which I want to bring around to uh, a line in the movie that hit me like a fucking wrench. Like, there's a point where he's having um, a conversation with his daughter, and she's getting riled up, and she's straight up like, it's in the third act of the movie where she's just straight up confronting him like, why weren't you there?
Yeah.
Why, like, I needed you in my life, why would you not want to be a part of my life? And he just, in the mid, like, it's after this whole movie of Charlie just being kind and gentle and just gracious and empathetic and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt as lovely fucking people around him. Like, everyone he talks about, he speaks about glowingly. And he just says, look at me. Who would want me in their life? I mean, like, fuck, man. Like, that hits deep. That hits a core fucking problem when you get that far down that rabbit hole of depression. And like I was saying, like, this is not a subtle movie, but
It's effective.
it's very raw. It just hits you in the face with this stuff, and it all feels very fucking real.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to for me.
And I think it's just on a very interesting concept about kind of what I was talking about earlier about choosing to be kind, because the problem with that, and I do think it's a noble pursuit. I do think it's worth pursuing, but the issue that I feel like you and I especially run into quite a lot, is that it also means we leave very little room to express that compassion towards ourselves. And there's this instinct to give it all away because you know what it feels like to have the lack of it.
Well, I also have this whole thing where it's like giving it to myself feels conceited. I've been
Feel
made
like, am
to
I worthy of it?
Well, it's also that I've been made to feel like, in multiple relationships, especially recent ones, I've been made to feel like asking for my needs is selfish.
Yeah.
Ending to myself is selfish. Like, and I can do everything in the world to try to be accommodating to their needs, but the moment I start talking about myself, it's unfair, and
Yeah.
I'm not considering them. And it's that's been a thing that's been a like it's been in my life for a long time. It's been in my family, and that can just worm its way into your head, into your base level reactions to things. It's just like, no, you are not a priority until you're never a priority for yourself. And that's what happens. That's what leads people to where Charlie was.
Yeah. And I don't have the answer to get out of that. And I feel like that's what I'm still actively looking for.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I mean, I don't really have much words to say beyond this. That it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answers, no easy paths, no easy solutions.
And I think that's another thing about this movie. There is no hope in this movie.
Not for Charlie, at least.
Not for Charlie. Um, like it's very clear at the beginning of the movie, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point of the film. He's going to die. It is someone that it is too late for. But something that stuck with me was it's not too late for me yet. So that,
I'm glad you feel that way.
yeah. So, God, this feels like we're reviewing The Father all over again. Haven't had one like this in a while. But yeah, I give this a solid 9 out of 10.
I agree.
Maybe even a 9.5. Like it's not quite a 10 out of 10 for me, but there's something very rawly human and real about this. And maybe a lot of people won't connect with it, but I did. And it meant a lot to me. And honestly, I think that when filmmakers make a movie like this, they don't care how many people hate it. They care that it's hit at least one person the way that it hit me. And I know that I'm not alone in this. So in that sense, they succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't know what else I can say that I feel like we haven't already covered. This is it.
Give it a number, Michael.
I'm agreeing with you. I'll say like a 9.5. Jesus Christ! All right.
Well, good.
I thought we were reviving.
We were. I'm just trying to encourage more. Things like this, I tend to ramble, so like I want to like
Fair
try
enough,
to a little more balance.
This is
But
slightly off topic, but it's going back to like not recognizing ourselves as like attractive people. But like I was at Dave and Buster's earlier today, and I realized my problem with dating is I don't have a face that says date me. I have a face that says like no, I don't want to date you, but I'll tell you my life story unprompted. You seem like you'd be better at listening to my life story unprompted. I'm like, well, they're not wrong.
yeah,
I know this.
Maybe leave that in therapy.
It's more like I was just standing by the bar waiting to get served, and this woman next to me starts talking to me. Next thing you know, she's talking to me about like how she didn't date for 7 years, and now she's dating the bartender, and
oh god,
like, the abusive relationship she went past. That was why she didn't date for 7 years. I'm like, I just wanted to get a beer,
right?
I didn't even initiate this conversation. You talk to me.
Oh man.
But anyway, yeah, no, this is a great movie, and I'm glad we made the effort to go see it, even though we're definitely way behind.
Yeah, well, it happens.
That being said, we are getting close to wrapping things up for last year, so I can finally watch what came out this year.
We got to see Megan, dude.
Yeah, I got Megan. There's also Plane.
I really want to see Skinamarink.
I got all next week off, so I'll have time to catch up on stuff. Yeah.
Right now, it's only showing in the Mercado twice a day, so I don't know if it's even going to be around past Wednesday.
Oh well,
we'll see. In any case, thanks for attending our therapy session.
Our very public therapy session. Some people watching this review going, Jesus, what do they think about the movie?
This isn't a review, it's a trauma dump. Live on YouTube. Hey everyone, I've suffered extreme abuse and PTSD, and I have an eating disorder. Here's what I think about the whale. Like,
hear that, or it's like there's like that one person who's been chomping at the bits for this since we did the Father review. Who's gonna be like, finally,
another insight into these friends' lives.
So I can build my parasocial relationships.
Get weird. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Parasocial relationships get weird. All right, man.
So I think we're all good there. So I don't know if we have time for Babylon, but we'll talk about it eventually. If
not tonight, but I actually got to go. But
yeah, we'll talk about Babylon soon, and after that, we'll finally do the best and worst of list and get all that shit done. So, Thank you all for watching. See you later.